In part 1 I discovered the power transformer and the output transformer were both open circuit. I've sent them both off to be rewound. I also decided the chassis was too rusty, so I'm going to strip it out and send it off to be replated. Well, there it is, all done. Took quite a few hours to do that. Didn't seem so on the video, but I can tell you it's quite a few hours and a little bit of concern that I'm going to be able to put it back together. But anyway, I'll take it down to the plate shop. I might try and just carefully sand off some of the heavier rust. It's a little bit heavy around this area here and here. Just to make sure they'll acid dip it before they plate it, but I don't want any pitting in it if I can help it, or minimal pitting anyway. So here's the components and wiring from the bottom of the chassis. It's come out as one piece, more or less, so pretty happy with that. You may have noticed in the video, I'm not sure if it's going to show or not, but the volume controls completely destroyed. I've got to work out, I might be able to hide a modern volume control in there. I'll see if you can do that or not. Yeah, that's a mess, that one. There's the chassis back from the plate shop and it looks pretty good. So it's come up well. I've received the transformer back that was had to be rewound, and there was the output transformer that's also been rewound, and a terrific job as well. There's a few items I need to fix: volume control, tone control. I've got to try and work out those capacitors that were going onto the tuning capacitors. I'll do a few of those things, and then I'll try and put this back together. Now I need to deal with this volume control. The windings in it, the wire, are completely destroyed, and there's no way I can do it. I can't possibly rewind that. So I'm just going to pull it apart. I just take this wiper out, and the shaft comes out there. And take out the 3 bolts and nuts with the tabs on them. Then the resistive wiper comes out. There we go. Now I bought this new potentiometer, and it's a linear potentiometer. Now it should be log. Just looking at the windings on the old resistive strip, they're closer together at one end than the other, so I'm assuming that one was a log pot. This is a 2-watt pot, and I think I'm going to need 2 watts because it's got the screen voltage going through it. So what I'm going to do, I can put a little resistor between the center wiper and the ground side of the pot, and that will make it look like a log pot to some degree, so that'll get me out of that trouble. Now I didn't want to destroy this, but I can't see any other way of doing it. I can't repair that resistive strip, so I'm going to sacrifice this housing. I'm just machining off the boss that's on the inside and the outside, and level that off, and I just need to drill it out to the size of the new pot. And there the pot slides in quite nicely there. That's good. I've left a little bit on the outside though, so it fits on the bracket correctly. Then there's 2 screws here on the sides, and I'll just put those in. And that looks pretty good. And from the outside, this will look like a normal pot that was fitted 80-90 years ago. I'm just going to screw some solder tags on the inside, and I'll just run some little link wire between the tags and the tags on the pot. It'll look just the same as it did 80-90 years ago, as long as you don't look in the back, and you can't see in the back when it's mounted on the radio, so I think that's going to be a reasonable fix. Let's hope making it a log pot will work. The next item on the list, this tone control here. Now this was a big feature in 1931 when they added tone controls. Very rudimentary. It's got 3 capacitors mounted on the side here. I think that's about 220, and they're both 1000 puff. All it has is a wiper and some rivets through a micarta type base, and you just go from one to another, and that just selects a different capacitor. These two aren't connected to anything, so if you're up there, you've got that won't change anything. You've got the full signal going through to the grid. If you put it on this one, that'll take a little bit of the top end off, the top frequencies, and pass it through the 220 puff to ground. Similarly, if you put it to that connection, it goes through both of these 1000 puff capacitors to ground, and that gives you 500. And if you go to that one, it goes just from there to ground. So pretty simple. I've cleaned it all up, so it looks alright. The capacitors are alright, I measured them. It's got a bit of an issue. I don't think the wipers, I can just wobble it and change the tone, and it's just loose. So I think, not sure what you do with it. Oh, the nut's loose. I'll just tighten the nut up and that should fix it. I didn't even think that the nut would be loose. I've tightened that up, but it feels awful. It's very graty, graunchy. Let's pull it apart again and see if we can't get some grease or something in there on the shaft at least. I'll put a star washer on there, that might just stop it undoing again. Yeah, that's quite an improvement. That feels good actually, for what it is. It's good. So let's test it now. So it's in the position where it's not connected to anything, so nothing should change. It's got 0.01. There's a bit of capacitance in the circuit there. So if I go there, we should get 220, 270 odd. There you go. That'll do. Close enough. And that should be about 500, 450. That'll do. And that should be up near the 900 odd. I think that's working pretty well, so I'll move on to the next stage. Now, a little earlier we looked at these 3 cans that are here, which contain capacitors. I believe each one has 3 capacitors in it. So I'm going to address that now. Here's the schematic, and here's the 3 capacitors, one set for each can. And I've just coloured them blue, green and yellow. And whoever did this drawing, which is supposed to be Graham Donaldson, I'm not sure if he's added these bits or not, but whoever's done it, they've put can 1, capacitor 1, can 1, capacitor 2, can 1, capacitor 3, and same for can 2 and can 3. So that's made it so much easier. All the capacitors are the same value, 0.25, so I'll just replace them all. So on the cans on the radio, there's 4 wires going inside each one of them, so that would correspond here. So there's one there, one there, one on that side, so that's 3, and one on that side, that's 4. So there's the 4 connections inside. So it should be pretty easy. I'll just see how easy it is to get the old caps out. Well, there they are, and as we saw a bit earlier on, these are waxed. I guess I'll try and melt them out. I'm hoping to pick up the original wires, so I don't have to play with the wiring out on top there. So I'll just melt it out. I'll see what I can do. I'll see what happens. I started to melt this wax out and realised I'm going to be there all day, and it really wasn't needed. I reckon it'll just about come out. It's come away from the edges there. All I have to do is unsolder the 4 capacitor wires that are coming out of it, and it's hopefully just come out, or I'll be able to chip it out or something. But certainly trying to melt the wax out was never going to work. So I'll just desolder them. But clearly this isn't going to plan. I can't lever on that because I'll just bend it. So I don't know. I don't want to ruin the case. I want to be able to look at the case. I've been working on this for a little while. I've found the wires, which I can hopefully trace back and work out which capacitors are going to which places on this terminal strip. I can't follow it back from the circuit because clearly the circuit's in pieces, and once I put the circuit back on the chassis I can't get to these readily to do all this. So if I can find out which wires are going where, I might be able to work out how to wire it back up again. At least I can then check it later on when I connect it all back into the circuit. I think it's finally going to give. Oh, there we go. Goodness sakes. Whoops. So what they've got is three capacitor in layers there. So there's still one in there, one there and one there. So really all I need to know is that one, and the rest are just single capacitors. They can go anywhere they like. So I just determine which wire that was and which point it was on the can, and that's pretty much all I need to know. And wouldn't really matter which way I connected any of the others because they'll all be exactly the same. It'll just be three capacitors coming off one point. So just got to find that. Okay, reconstructed where the wires went, and that's right. Now there's three capacitors, 1, 2 and 3, and there's the common one there. So there's a link between that top capacitor, the center capacitor, and there's another tab down here for the bottom capacitor. There's nothing on it. It's never had anything on it. So that capacitor hasn't done anything since day one. That's the wire that links them all together. So that one should, if I put a meter on there, it should measure 0.25 to each one of these. So it's no wonder I couldn't get the meter to make any sense because one of them's disconnected. It wasn't even there. But anyway, I've worked that out. That's the one I've got to concentrate on and just make that a common and just link some capacitors in there. So easy fix. Just to show you in case you're doing one of these radios, that wire would correspond to the hole that's here. So just for a bit of fun, I'll put the capacitance tester on that tab and connect it into the circuit that it should have been from day one. And we'll just see what we get. So that's that one there, so we shouldn't get anything. Yeah. And that one. So 0.5, supposed to be 2.5. 0.3, that's not too bad. And the last one, 0.3. So they're still supposed to be 2.5. Those aren't too bad. I don't know what they'll do if they've got a bit of voltage on one side. Just looking at ways of putting these new caps in, and I think what I might do is put them in that way. So I'll put 3 caps in like that. I'll insulate the legs going out, of course, and I'll then connect all 3 pins across the bottom. So I'll just shorten those, connect them all together, and then run another lead out through the 4th hole, which will be the common. So that should work alright, and not much chance of it shorting on anything, and it should be quite sturdy. So that's what I've ended up with. I've got the 3 caps going at the first 3 holes, and then the common on the bottom is going at the 4th hole. So that should be quite neat, and I think it should be sturdy enough to hold itself. So I'll just bend them over and solder them on. And there's heat shrink on there to stop it shorting with the case. And I think that'll be alright. I don't think it needs any other support. So that's come up nice. So they're nice and sturdy. They're not going to short or anything. Plenty of room. There's room on the top, room on the bottom, plenty of room on the bottom. I don't need to put any more support in that. That'll be fine. There you go, all done. I've taken the wax out of these two and replaced the capacitors with new ones. So they look pretty good. I reckon that's a pretty good fix. Now this one I sprayed with a bit of freeze spray, and it seemed to come out easier. It came out as a big block. I still had to dig it out to a certain extent, but the whole thing came out as one. So whether that helped or not, I don't know. But if you're going to try this, maybe throw them in the freezer and freeze them up, and they might just crack out of the case if we can. If you can let it, perhaps cut around the edges first with a knife or something. But the big problem is getting it off the bottom here. I think I could have left these capacitors in. I think they would have still worked all right. Bar the one that didn't have it connected there. Of course, that never worked. But anyway, it's done now. And when I couldn't get a reading on one of the capacitors on that first can, I thought, no, let's just change them all. So it's done now. I think the next thing I'll do is clean these cans up. I've got to paint these containers. Also paint these valve shields, and I also have to do the capacitors for the power supply. So still a lot of work to go before I can start putting this back together. One of the final things I need to do before I can reassemble this radio is to repair this back plate. It's a phenolic material, and it's got the speaker connectors there, and these are voltage selectors. So there's an arm which selects the various voltages, input voltages. So it's broken there, and it's got some cracks in it here. It's all bent out of shape as well, so it's been in a bad way for a while. So what I thought I'll do is I will cut out another piece of phenolic sheet and just re-drill all the holes, just line it all up, drill all the holes, and re-rivet it, and that should come out like new. Well, here's the old one. It's all stripped off, and all the parts are on this new replacement, and it's come up pretty good. I'm quite happy with that. I used steel pop rivets here. This is the voltage selector, and I was able to solder the tabs on the back there, so we get a good connection on there. So that part's ready. Well, now comes the easy part. I just got to put all this wiring back. Bought some little brass rivets, and I'm going to rivet back the valve plates with that. So they'll go to hold this back. That's what they used originally, so I'll just try and duplicate it. How successful it'll be, I don't know. So I think I'm going to attach all the main components I can, and then the wiring should fall into place. I've got lots of video of what I've done or what it looked like, and hopefully my numbering system will get me out of trouble. There's some resistors I've still got to check. There's a cap, I've got to throw that out, and there's some under there I've got to check. I've got to work out what they are and then check them. That one looks really old. It looks old. Probably better off just changing them now, and then everything should work perfectly. So I don't think I'll videotape that. You've seen enough of me putting things apart. If you want to see how to put it together, just run the first part of the video in reverse. I had a bit of trouble with the riveting to start with, and the rivets were a bit long. That's how they turned out. They just all split on the ends. I shortened them a bit, and they came out much better. For an anvil, I used a coach bolt I polished up and put in a piece of timber there. There's the rivet going in, and there's the anvil going underneath, and just fits nicely in the dimple in the chassis. As I said, the rivets are a bit long, so I made a bit of timber there with a hole in the middle, and just was able to just machine the top off, make them a bit shorter. It's just a matter of whacking it down with the mandrel. There it is, good. Another rivet. And comes out pretty good, nice and neat. I'm progressing well, very slow, but I'm getting there, and I'm taking it easy and taking it slowly as well to make sure I don't make any mistakes. So I've done most of the bottom as far as I can go, so I'm going to flip it over and do the top parts now. I can mount some of the stuff on the top. I did make one mistake. I put these 3 sockets on here, and these 3 valves have got shields, and I've neglected to put the retaining clips on the bottom, or the rings. So I had to take the 3 off again, and put the rings on, rivet them on, and then put these back. So that's okay, we can do that. This little voltage selector and speaker socket plate worked out alright. It's come out quite good. This spacer and its bolt and nut were missing, so I machined up a new spacer, and I managed to get a bolt out of an area you can't see, and I replaced it with a more modern bolt, but yeah, you can't see where that went, so that'll come up good, and that's very solid now. It's very good. I think the next job is to mount the condensers and the coils that go in here. Then I can remount the transformer and the capacitors and connect it all up underneath. I've restored all the shields and cans that go on the top of the set, so I'm all ready to put them back in. Now I've had the power transformer rewound, and that's it back there. I also had the output transformer rewound. Now the gentleman that did this has just done an outstanding job. He drew all the wiring out for me with the colours. I thought I was going to have to sit there and buzz them all out to work it out, and then I found this in the box. So really good, and highly recommended. He didn't want me to put his name out because he's retired and wants to keep it just slow and steady. If you're in Hersa, he's in the Radio Waves magazine in the centre there. I was just cleaning up the front panel that's got the tuning condensers on it to refit it, and this is the shaft that drives the tuning dial. So it just grips it in here with a big spring, and it just moves it around. So I took this off to lubricate it, but then when I did, it fell apart. It was in 2 bits. I could glue it back together, but it's not going to be the same. So what I thought I'll do is I'll make one out of aluminium stock and refit that. So I'll do that now. There's the old one. It's just fallen apart. So the more I handled it, the more it fell apart, and it just chipped off bits everywhere. So yeah, that was never going to keep working. That's the new one all finished, and it's come up pretty good. So I just can't fit that in the chassis, and it should be alright. It's got to have a circlip on the back there, and it's got a little boss there to centre it in the chassis. So it'll centres, and then the screws hold it. So yeah, it's very smooth and quite good. The chassis is progressing well, so I'm up to the point now where I'm going to start thinking about putting capacitors back in, and the chokes. Now the chokes are in a little box by themselves, and this is supposed to have all the capacitors in it. Now when I read the schematic, I should have 11 wires coming out. I've only got 10, so I don't know exactly what's going on in there. Now I could just add capacitors as per the schematic, but I'd like to really see what they're doing in here. So what I thought I might do is split it and just try and peel it back and see what in fact is going on inside, and how many capacitors are in there and what these wires are connected to. One, two, three, four, five. There's 5 in there, but there's supposed to be 7. So I don't know where the other 2 are. Maybe going crossways on top. Don't know. How do I get it out of here? Wow, that was a bit of fun. This all melted way faster than I thought it would. When it did finally melt, most of it just sort of oozed out and fell on the into the pan. So I don't quite know how they were, but there were 2 layers of 5 sitting there, so something like that. And then this little guy was jammed in the side here. What I work out is these are all 1 microfarad each. Each one of these packs is 1 microfarad, and this will be 0.25. There's a pack of 3 there, so that's 3 microfarads. There's a pack of 3 there, so that's 3 microfarads. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 1 microfarads. Here's the schematic. I've marked all the capacitors that are supposed to be in that can in orange. So there's the 2 3s, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 number 1s, or 1 microfarad, and then a 0.25. So it's exactly as it's on this schematic. I was concerned because other people have been saying that some of these aren't correct, but that's what's in the original radio, so I'm going to go with that. So all that's left now is to correlate where these points are on here into the radio, and then work out what capacitors to use. And I'm going to mount them in one of the cans there, and I'll put it on a tab strip or tag strip, and that should come out pretty neat, and it'll be all hidden and look original. So this is what I've come up with, a solution to the old capacitors that were in this can that I just dismantled. This is the choke pack that's got to go in there as well. So it used to have the old capacitor pack sitting here, but without that there, of course, this thing could just float around inside the can. So I've made up an aluminium retaining plate, and that holds the choke pack in there and the cover against it on that side. So yes, it won't go anywhere. And also gave you somewhere to mount these other capacitors and spread them out a bit, otherwise it would have been a bit tight down the bottom there. So these red capacitors are all 1 microfarad. So I've got a bank of 3 here and a bank of 3 here. That gives me the 2 3 microfarad capacitors I need for the chokes. I needed another 2 1 microfarads, and that's them there. I needed a 0.225. I've got a 0.22 there. That was for the speaker. One of the chokes was open, so I've replaced it with a 100k resistor, and I've upped the capacitor after it to 16 microfarad, because the resistor is not going to be as effective as a choke, of course. So my plan is I'll just mount that in there temporarily, a couple of screws in there, and I can run all the wires. Choke will go in there. Now that's upside down, the wires go through the bottom, and then the cover goes over the top, and it'll look good. That's wired up, and everything fell into place quite well, so I was quite happy with that. I've also wired in the choke pack, and I've just tied it with some tie wraps or zip ties, whatever you want to call them, just to hold it in place. I'll take that off before I fit the can back over the top when I've finished. I'm going to leave it like this while I do the testing and power on, and just make sure all the stuff behaves itself, and it doesn't get hot or short or something. So there it is. That's where the capacitors are coming out. This is all new wiring here. The wire coming out of here is the chokes, and they're all back where they were. Now one of the chokes was open circuit, so it's just lying there, and I've just capped it off so it can't short, but I've left the wire there. And here's the new transformer, or a rewound transformer. So that's all wired up nicely, and got all the voltage selector sorted out there. So everything's ready, and I think it's ready to put power on. Alright, let's put some power on. So what I've got the number 80 rectifier valve in. There are no other valves in, and I haven't got the speaker plugged in either. So it should only just be the rectifier, and we should see what voltages we're getting out of that. Now we're going through the isolation transformer, variac, and the dim bulb at the moment. So it's on dim bulb. Now I've turned the variac down to about 150 volts, just to see what happens. I'm plugged in and ready to go. Let's see what happens. So the light hasn't come on at all. We're pulling 7.9 watts, 132 volts, and 0.06 amps. So that looks pretty good. So that should be enough to get the rectifier going, I would think. So I'm on AC there. So that's the 2 plates, so we've got 381 volts across the plates. Now I'm on the centre tap there, so we should have half that voltage either side. 195 and about 196, so that's perfect. So I'll switch to DC. I'll just ground the probe. I got the probe the wrong way around, but it won't matter. So 195 volts coming out of the rectifier, and I bet it's the same, 196. Good. So the rectifier is working, the transformer is working. So I've gone back to AC. I'll just see what filament voltage we got. That's should be about 2.5. It'll be something. Yeah, it's 1.5 because we're only running on half the power. So we've got filament voltage, and I can see the globe on the front's working too on the dials. Everything's looking good, so we're still pulling under 8 watts and 0.06 amps, so that's pretty good. I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to plug the speaker in the back, assuming it fits in my new socket. Yep, perfect. Okay, good. I have buzzed out the speaker with a meter, so I think it's okay. We'll just see what happens here. It's much the same. I actually got some hum there. Well, that's okay. The speaker's making a noise, and we're not pulling in excessive amps or watts, so I'm going to flip it over and start putting some valves in and see how we go with that. Well, there it is. I've put all the valves in now. I can't think of any other way of doing it. Pointless trying to do it with some of the valves out. I'll just keep an eye on the current draw. I still got the variac set a bit low, so we're only 157 volts. And I'll just see what happens. Dim bulb, well, that looks good. And 6, nearly 7 watts. So we haven't got any short circuits. It's running at about 88 volts. So it's not pulling much. That's probably not enough to get the rectifier going. I'll just put that up a bit. I think we need to get somewhere near 120 or so. I'll take the dim bulb out and I'll just run it up on the variac. Okay, so we're up to 150 volts there, still on the variac, and we're getting some noise. So the voltages and the wattage looks pretty good. Let's take it up a bit higher. There we're at 200 volts. But I'm not getting anything at all. Nothing. I think it's time I'll have to flip it over and check some voltages so we know the amp's working, and you can hear the volume control. So it's working after that.